It's my story, not your story. So the last video we talked, we were in Colorado. Deploy, that's what happens on the farm.
Ruined my milk.
She kicked the milk can.
Yeah, and got sawdust in it.
She never does that.
I know, this is for the video. This is special for you. So that a family had lived, Pearl's gonna pee for you. And so, first little bit, I just got whacked again. And trees that, yeah, I'm not just gonna poop for you. This is her mutinying and being super upset that I'm talking and not finishing the job. This is kind of her temper tantrum. But the next year, so.
Hey, so we tried to do the talking and milking thing at the same time. It didn't work well. Pearl didn't really like that because she was just not doing well standing there. I'm gonna talk about my part of this time away from family when we moved Bernadette and the kids back to Ohio. She had the farm going on there, and then so where did I go? Kind of mentioned it in the last video about, you know, our Colorado time, that we found a good church to plug into. I wound up staying with a couple in that church, and I won't go into like everything, but I want to touch on a few things. One, it was such a blessing. We had gone to church there. I told you it took us a little while to find a community we wanted to plug into, that we felt, you know, right in. So even though we had been there since January, we hadn't been going to church there since January. It was probably spring before we really found and plugged into that body. So we're talking a few months. We had been to these folks' house for small group a few times. When they found out what we were doing, they said that they would take me in. So that's what I did. This is a couple, you know, I'll just call them, I don't think they'll have a problem with it. If they do, I'll edit it out. But Paul and Carla, they had 2 boys. Both were out of the house. They didn't live there, so I ate with them. Every day we lived life together, and it was an interesting time because so much of me wanted to be into the future, you know, wanted to be past this time in my life where I was separated, because it wasn't like something I wanted to do. It was something that we had decided to do to set our family up, to start paying towards a farm while I still had a steady income in the military. And, you know, here, this is, again, family man, 100%. I don't ever want to be away from my family, but we chose to do this. And so much of my mental energy was focused on the future. Having this couple there certainly helped me during this time frame in very practical ways. So really what I want to touch on is they had skill at life. They've been married, you know, over 30 years. They had developed a routine that just 100% worked. And I just admired that so much. I mean, I will name a few things that stood out to me. And that was, you know, they always did dishes together. And it was kind of the time at the end of the day. They never left a full sink. It was the time at the end of the day where they got to discuss what went on during the day, what was going on the next day. It was almost like an unwind period. And I just would sit there and, you know, I would drink my coffee while they were drinking their tea, or, you know, drink tea with them. That was another thing. We had tea or coffee every evening. wow, so many stories. I could relay so much, but this video would get super long. But another thing was the coffee spoon. So the coffee spoon, you know, the spoon that everybody stirs their coffee with. Well, with 3 adults in the house, the coffee spoon would be used and then it would be set on the corner of the sink, so that when washing the dishes and cleaning up, it was just super easy to go over the corner with the rag and clean the coffee stain that the coffee spoon made. And again, I could get into so much. It's just stuff that you don't think about. And Brenda and I had been married for, you know, a while. For a young couple, we'd been married for a while at the time. This was 2012, 13, and we got married in 2003. So we were approaching 10 years of married life with 3 kids. And still, I mean, I say still, but it shouldn't come as a shock. So much to learn from people who weren't my parents. I think sometimes you can learn things better from people who aren't your parents, because you didn't grow up in that atmosphere. You can see things that you probably took for granted in your own life. And I saw so many things. And I would say that was one of the biggest things that I took away from that period in time. One was, like Bernadette talked about, you know, I really had a lot of time to research things that she was experiencing. So she would talk about things in the evening when I was talking to her that were happening on the farm, that were firsts, and I would, you know, go to Google, go to YouTube, go to, you know, just search. I became an expert at search criteria. I knew exactly how to put the question in to the search engine to produce an answer for my question. And then the other thing was just that amazing skill at the very routine things in life, and how a lot of meaning can come from just, again, very routine things like just cleaning up at the end of the day so that you start fresh the next morning. And I'm not to say we have not mastered that skill. Like, we are not at the Paul and Carla level, especially with 2 more kids added since then. But, you know, I hope to get to the point someday where we are, you know, that skilled and just the very routine things in life. That is something that I aspire to, and that's something I appreciate about my 1.5 years of being with my second family there in Colorado. So, if Paul and Carla are watching this, I love you, I appreciate you, I thank you for taking this almost, they would tell you I wasn't a complete stranger. It must have been the Spirit of God, because they didn't know much about me, just what we had given during our time in small group. But I appreciate that time, and I appreciate their generosity and just the support that they gave me and their family as well. I had a relationship, a good relationship with their youngest son. Their oldest son lived in a different state, and I never actually got to meet him face to face. But Daniel, their younger son, he and I got to talk quite a bit, and he actually got married or right around that same time frame. So he started his new life with his new bride, and that was really fun to get to talk, you know, to somebody who was, you know, just a little bit behind me in terms of life experience with being married. And he had such great role models in his parents, and I think we also got to talk a little bit about you know, where Bernadette and I had come in our 10 years together. That'll wrap up my little portion of this. We'll get back to Bernadette's portion and some stories from the home front in Ohio. Hey, so something I didn't mention that a Mazra told me I should. It became something of a tradition when I was out in Colorado with Paul and Carla, that after church on Sundays, I would start nachos. So, yeah, like I don't even know how it became a thing, but it became a thing. We'd go back on Sundays, and I don't know, probably more Sundays than not, we would eat nachos for lunch. because it was super easy, super quick, and we would just use whatever was in the house for toppings. And so that has kind of continued for both of our families, I think. They have sent me pictures on Sunday afternoons in the past, you know, since I've been back with the family and everything over these years, of them making nachos, and I think we've done the same a couple times, sent them pictures of us making nachos. We have nachos all the time. There's always nachos in the house because of that time, really. I realized how super easy and super quick and how customizable they were. So, nacho story. It's my story, nacho story.
Little backstory. Before we got to Ohio, when we were in Fort Carson, we kind of like drank the homesteading Kool-Aid. Like, we had horses before that. We had attempted some gardening, but then we got chickens, and like I think we called chickens the gateway drug last time. And once we got chickens and we started, like, they made us food, which horses never make you food, they just eat things. And so once we got the chickens and they like laid eggs, we were like, this is so cool. And so then we started, like, I really do want to garden, and I really do want our garden to like be productive. You know, what else could make us food that we could raise? Because this is like super rewarding. I super loved it. It was so fun to do with the kids. And so we kind of like drank the Kool-Aid in Fort Carson. So when we moved back to Ohio, that was part of the reason that we wanted like a little farm. Like, if you're thinking of a farm, maybe you're thinking row crops, but we're talking like a homestead, something where we could grow what would sustain us, or at least a good portion of what would sustain us. And so it was a house with 8 acres. We did buy it sight unseen, but we knew that it had lots of bedrooms. We knew that it had a really old basement because it was built in the 1880s. So it had that wonderful stone foundation. We didn't realize how wonderful of a basement until we got there. And its like ability to be like a root cellar, and how we just kept like cabbage and carrots sitting on a shelf down there for a really long time, and they kept. That was amazing. We didn't realize that ahead of time, but I probably didn't even know enough then to be looking for a basement that could act as a root cellar either. So anyway, so we moved there thinking, okay, so we want to grow like everything that we eat. What else can we grow? So we got there and we had bought the farm. It wasn't really ready for us to move in, like Avery said. We pulled out a bunch of carpets, redid a bunch of floors. When I say we, I mean wonderful people that the Lord blessed us with did that for us. I was not very handy at any of that, and Avery was gone. So that got done, and we moved in, and then my dad was super faithful to come like every week and help me fix all of the things that you would normally be like, hey Abe, so this is like a squeaky board, and then he would have fixed it, but he wasn't there. So my dad was super helpful, always there, always helping. And actually he would be like, hey Bernadette, I noticed you had a squeaky board, let's fix that. I didn't even have to say anything. Then because we got back there before Avery left for Kuwait, he had a few months where he would be going back and forth to trainings and just doing all the preliminary work. He came back for Thanksgiving and surprised us, and in that surprise weekend that he was home, Avery and his dad and my dad and one of Avery's uncles, and I can't even remember who else all showed up, dug like a 220-foot trench to one of our barns and put electric out there, and dug a 150-foot trench to another barn and put water and electric out there, trying to make it easier for me and the kids for the winter. Because this house built in 1880 had the most gorgeous barns ever. Hand-hewn logs, super big, in good repair. Like, they were fabulous barns.
Mortise and tenon. Yeah.
That's how fabulous they were. And anyway, so but they needed a few updating things, like electric to the chicken coop and water to the barn, because that just wasn't working anymore, or whatever. So he came back one weekend and did that. He came back over Christmas, and I'm sure did some other helpful thing. I can't even remember. But like every time Avery came, we had this great work project, and lots of things got done. And then the kids and I kind of went into like live and learn mode. Like, we would just take care of everything and learn a bunch about it and live. And then Avery would come back, and whatever the problem was, like, we would take care of it and improve the farm every time we got more time with him. So that was like, but before moving in, we got the farm kind of established, and then came back and did those work projects. We were living there by Thanksgiving, but putting the water in was a game changer. So every time Avery came back, the farm improved, and I was getting ready to say the animals that we had there. One of the weekends that Avery came back, he and, was it Maddie, went and picked up a set of pigs?
Yep.
He and Maddie went and picked up a set of pigs.
We never had pigs before. This was our first.
Right. This is our first jump into the deep end.
Porcine experience.
Our first jump into the deep end. And what were they like? What were they called when we got them? They're like 40 pounds. So they're just...
They're wiener pigs.
Yeah, just weaned from their mamas and just, you know, little pigs. Very strong, but little.
Yeah.
And very loud.
Yeah.
So
they were Yorkshires for anybody who really wants to know what breed they were.
Yeah, and they were delicious. But we got 2, and...
Remember the names?
They were Onesimus, which means useful, and Bert.
Bert.
As in from Mary Poppins. Bert. Yes.
Did
yeah.
we name Bert?
We did for your dad.
Okay.
He didn't name him.
Okay.
And everyone tried to warn us that we should not name them because our kids wouldn't want to eat them. But as we're super practical and I wasn't going to keep feeding them once they got big, so the kids knew they were going to be eaten. And
Never
even
had a problem with that, really.
No. And like we just said, we said back then, even if we called them pig, that we would have said their name.
Yeah, that becomes a name once you call something
pig.
something for a while.
Yeah, and we would have associated them with pig. We would have said it with a certain affection or whatever, knowing it was them, not just some random pig. It would be that pig. Anyway, so yeah, so we had a good time of you coming and establishing something and making something better, and then you would leave and we would go into like, you know, learn and sustain, exactly. And learning so much about it. And so Avery got the pigs, and then I was super interested in us having raw milk, and I was not comfortable having a cow because I wasn't that comfortable working a large animal without Avery, knowing I would be doing it by myself. So Avery found me some really great dairy goats, really friendly, really well-mannered, really good bloodlines. So they just kind of are healthy because they come from healthy stock, and really good producers. And I don't drive the trailer, like that's not my gift, pulling the horse trailer. And so he was gone, but he orchestrated the whole thing for us, and all I had to do was show up and buy and pay for them and bring them home, I think. And so someone drove the trailer for me, and we went and picked the goats up and brought them home, and they were super fun learning experience. So we had dairy goats there. That first winter we didn't get their babies with them. They were already weaned from their babies, so they were just producing milk for us. And then actually with that purchase we got breed back rights, so we took them back. Actually when Avery got home from deployment, she babysat the goats for me while I went out to Colorado to be with Avery.
That worked out nice.
It did. And then the goats were bred, and while grandparents kept our human kids, nobody had to take care of a dairy animal for us except for the farm they came from, who were very equipped to take care of dairy animals. And then when we came home, they were bred. So that first year we just milked them, and then the second year we actually got to be there for them having their kids, and all of the kids got to witness it and see the different stages of labor and how to get a baby to latch at first, and so many amazing learning experiences with that. And some loss, because we had some babies that didn't make it, and we got to talk about, you know, how that worked out and what maybe we could have done differently, and it was just a learning experience all around. And we had chickens there, some really pretty ones. We were slightly pickier, I would say, or maybe we just got lucky, and the lady that we bought chickens from had like a variety of breeds, and so we didn't get just Rhode Island Reds. We got some Rhode Island Reds because they're really efficient chickens. They give you a lot of eggs.
Yeah, they weren't chicks either.
No, they were like already just about ready to lay.
Yeah, they were about
I think they were
laying
16
age.
to 20 weeks, and chickens start laying between 20 and 26 weeks, so we didn't have that long to wait. And one of the unexpected blessings of the farm was where our chicken coop was actually had like 13 apple trees in front of it, which we didn't realize were apple trees when we were buying the property. They just looked like trees, and we actually didn't realize it had a chicken coop back there either. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be a chicken coop, but it had some kind of building that we use as a chicken coop. And so we learned that the chickens naturally wanted to be pest control for us, and we weren't really rotationally grazing anything or even making the most of the soil. We were learning a lot, and we were trying to figure it out, but I was setting up and moving temporary fence on my own with 3 little kids, and so I wasn't like the best at it. We were trying to judge what size paddocks to give the horses and whatnot, and I mean, we did it some, but not like we do now, I would say, and we don't even do it great now, but we do better now. But the chickens on their own just went and cleaned up that orchard. Like, they went through, and the first year, the apples we got from it were full of worms, and they made cider, but they definitely weren't eating apples. By the next year, Avery had been researching and trying to figure out, like, what could we do to save these trees? We really don't want to spray them down with chemicals. That kind of defeats the purpose, and it'd be a quick fix, but it would have a high cost long term. So as we're trying to figure this out, one morning I walk out to feed the chickens, and I either made a video for it, or I called Avery or took pictures and sent it to him. I was like, the chickens are fixing this. Like, there were visible circles they had scratched back from each tree, and they just had eaten the worms.
Yep.
that were moths that were going to crawl up the tree and become moths, coddling in the apples or whatever. And they just stopped the cycle right there in the beginning because they were able to be there at the right time. And the chickens were delighted. It was food. They turned them into eggs. And we had a great apple harvest that year.
Yeah, they were delicious apples.
So that was really super exciting. While we were there, I think some of the things that maybe were frustrations for Avery was that we couldn't bounce ideas off of each other 100%. Sometimes with the way our communication worked, I'd be like, hey, I came up with this great idea and I have it halfway implemented. And he'd be like, oh, but that's a bad idea because of these reasons. And so, like, we were composting what was coming from the chickens and the pigs, and I had this great idea that we should be growing along the edges of the buildings because the buildings were providing shelter, in some ways shade, because not everything can grow in sunlight all the time. And so, like, we had several outbuildings, but one of them was a wooden structure, and it was just like, what was it, a workshop or a wood shop? It wasn't really a garage. Was it a garage?
Which one?
The one that I put the tomatoes in.
Yeah, it was like a one-car workshop.
Yeah. And so I put compost all around the edges of this building and grew absolutely beautiful tomatoes. Like, it was the most prolific tomatoes probably we have ever grown to date. But when Avery came back and saw it, he was like, think about this. This is decomposing, and you have it right up against a wooden structure. Sawdust is made of wood.
Yeah, and it's not like it's, chemically pressure treated wood. Like, this is old wood on an old wooden building. I was just like,
wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, this is too acidic. It's going to rot the wood.
And so we had to break it away. But anyway, great tomatoes for 1 year. Lesson learned. I haven't put compost on a wooden structure since. But there's kind of some of the funny dynamics of one-sided conversations, I guess. But yeah, so what we learned.
Ideological checks and balances.
Yes, there we go. So what we learned a lot about pigs. We learned a lot more about chickens and, like, their natural abilities, because they were totally free range at this place. We had a while that we would try to contain them, but then after they did that with the apple trees, I was like, chickens should be loose. They know where to go. Let them figure it out. And so they were free range. They never tried to cross the road. Everyone always asks, don't your free-range chickens want to leave? No, they don't, because the bugs stop at the road. Like, there's never bugs in the road. So that was 2012, so that was 8 years ago. We have yet to have a chicken go in the road. And we've had loose chickens everywhere since then. So we learned about chickens, we learned about pigs. I learned a ton about dairy goats and about like the pregnancy cycle and keeping them healthy, because we did herbal worming there, tried to stay away from chemicals. I learned a lot more about the horses because I did the soul care for them through several seasons. Worked more on gardening. We attempted hugelkultur, which is where you, like, mound up instead of digging into the soil. Apparently we're opposed to digging in the soil. We keep trying things that don't make us dig, probably because we don't own the tiller. Tried hugelkultures, straw bale gardening there as well, and
By we tried hugelkultures, what she means is she threw sticks out there and halfway buried it with dirt.
This is true. But we grew food in it. It worked somewhat. And let's see, what else did we do there?
This was our first home that we ever bought, so
true.
We learned a lot about home ownership.
Yeah.
And I would say we learned a lot about what we're looking for in a farm,
yes, and a home.
going down the road. Like, of all the things that we loved about that house, and there were a lot of them. Like, it was right up our alley. 1880s farmhouse,
Huge
holes,
bedrooms.
big knot holes in the wooden floors, and that was wide plank floors because they were interested in utility back then, not European walnut. Like they didn't care about that kind of stuff. It was all about utility.
It was lumber from the surrounding woods.
we just loved that.
Yeah, some of
all the barns, like she was talking about. But one thing you cannot change about a place where you live is the water. So the water quality in that area, and specifically pockets of the area we're talking about, is a high sulfur. And we had, ours was definitely not the worst in the area by any means. There's a lot worse in that area, but we did have that, and so that was one of those things we put on the list. It doesn't just need to be, drinkable water. It needs to be.
It has to smell good.
Yeah, it needs to be pleasurable to sit in the shower. While you're cleansing yourself.
We also started touching on what we loved. Avery had a lot of family who were like, stop buying her these things that are dependent upon her. I cannot believe you got her pigs and you're leaving tomorrow. I cannot believe you just sent her dairy goats and you're not even there. We had to send someone to pick them up because
she's not exaggerating.
These conversations happen.
These words came out of people's mouths, which is fine because they're not wrong.
Yeah, right? It was a little crazy. But that all of us, me and all three of the big kids, look back on that time with fond memories. And it's funny because for a while we had to remind them, remember, Dad didn't live there, guys. Dad didn't live there. It wasn't the best time of our lives. Dad didn't live there. We missed him terribly. And we would have super sad missing Dad days where we did all of, we had like this routine we went through on our super sad missing Dad days. But they remember it with such fondness because we were busy, and we were busy doing things of purpose. They weren't busy catching up on every episode of their favorite show. As a matter of fact, we didn't even have a TV. We were busy outside and riding horses and caring for goats and feeding babies and
catching lightning bugs.
Yes, catching lightning bugs and eating popsicles, and our son hunted bears in his underwear and all kinds of things that we did.
That photo is right here.
It was a good time. And the kids were at such a fun, small age where everything was magical. And seeing all those things happen were very formative and shaping, and they just delight in God's creation and the things around them. And they love to take it in and to nurture things and to be a part. And that's probably one of my favorite things that we ever have made as like a choice, is that we're not living this life for them. We're not living this life around them. We're living this life with them. Like when it's time to go milk in the morning, at least 2 kids come with me almost every morning, and they're with me, and we have a routine, and we're doing it together. And then when it's time to go get hay, somebody rides with Dad, and they do it together. And when it's time to be out in the garden, everybody's out there being a part of it. It's not like, well, you guys go do your thing. We'll drop you off at baseball practice, and Dad and I are going to rush home and take care of all the animals. We do it all together. So I love it. I love that has become kind of part of our family culture, or it is our family culture, is that we are raising these things intentionally together.
And let me add that is something we have to continually remind ourselves of. It's not something that really comes natural to us. We, like I would say everybody else, get in a hurry and can get frustrated with the things that need to be done at certain times and in certain seasons. And with me, it's a whole lot faster for me to just do it myself than to, invite a child in and, do it with them. But again, like she said, it's something that we constantly, remind ourselves, and we try to do it better all the time to bring them into it, so that they experience it, they love it, and it's life enhancing skill that they're getting from it.
For sure.
So what we loved, that was it.
Yeah.
And trying to think if there's anything else that I want to add to what we loved?
We tried rabbits while we were there. I forgot all about the rabbits. Forget the rabbits. We tried rabbits and moved on.
Yeah. Yeah, how we left it. So let me just set this up with the next video going forward. I got back from deployment, and you know, somehow when we were talking, discussing this, looking at the way forward, and we had come to the conclusion that, you know, that we were gonna send them. They were gonna go back home, establish the farm. When I got back from deployment, I still had about 13 months left on my service contract before I could get out. We just weren't giving it the attention that detail needed. And when we bought the farm, and we just kind of realized that you can't just leave the farm.
Yeah.
We can't afford to have a rental payment out at, you know, Colorado, and be paying on a farm with nobody in it in Ohio.
And we weren't willing for us to stay for another 13 months.
Yeah, because I mean, at this point, you know, they moved in August. I get back in October of the following year.
Yeah.
So it's been almost a year and a half that I've been without them.
And we've been without him.
Yeah, and they were without me, and it was not fun at all. That part of it was not fun.
Yeah.
So started, you know, towards the end of my deployment, and then when I got back from deployment, I began looking at the options, and it worked out to where my slot that I was in, even though I had only been in that unit for 2 years, the unit was reflagging as a different type of unit, and my slot was going to go away. So what that did is it allowed me to move before I would typically be allowed to move. So what we wound up doing was I extended to go back to Fort Rucker, Alabama. So this is we said Fort Rucker the second time, the first time. So in our next video, we will be talking Fort Rucker the second time, and also we'll get into a little bit of the provision that happened with how we got out of our house. It's tempting to get into it right here since we're right on the subject, but this video is already probably going long. So next time, so how we left it.
There was water to the barn. There was electric to the barns. The grass was greener.
Yeah.
We had planted blueberry bushes. We had established garden beds, whether or not they kept my hugelkultures.
We painted the deck.
They didn't. We did paint the deck. We put up trim because we had removed all the carpet, so it needed trim.
Had a wonderful compost pile.
It did have a very nice compost pile.
But we had to leave.
Yes. And ironically, I got phone calls a year later saying, I love how you planted all these sunflower seeds, all these sunflowers throughout the yard. They're just beautiful, popping up everywhere. And I said, I didn't plant any sunflowers. What are you talking about? Well, I did feed my goats sunflower seeds on the milking stand, and they planted sunflowers all throughout the yard, and apparently it was quite beautiful.
Because you know goats poop.
Yeah.
So.
And it's like a pile of fertilizer, so there you go.
So
that's how we left it.
Yeah, that's how we left it. If you like these videos, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, tell all your friends, your buddies, your neighbors, your aunts, your uncles, even people you don't like. Tell them all about this channel. We'd love to talk to them. So that's it.
Yeah.
Y'all have
a blessed day.